Bryan Mudd, a fan of South Plains politics. Here's your talking points for this week. Preparing for this school year may be an impossible job. Who knows what our kids and teachers will have to deal with? But we do have more safety guidance from state leaders. And how many of you know we have an election this week? I'll bet even fewer know about a voting method that may reopen polling places to many of our most vulnerable.
From the studios of KAMC Television in Lubbock, your local election headquarters. This is Talking Points with Bryan Mudd.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Also this week, who's in charge here? Leaders lead, and these tough times bring out the best and sometimes the worst in everyone. A lot of folks didn't care for the governor's mandatory mask order, but in the end, a majority now seems to be putting them on when they can and doing their best to hopefully get us all behind this a little bit quicker. Those types of things are important in real-world West Texas. But in the political world, there are questions that have to be answered, publicly and privately, about some of the decisions being made by the governor and the fact that he's kind of been the only one that's making them. Greg Abbott has said this is a time when decisions have to be made in a hurry. But censures have come from 6 county Republican groups, and Lubbock Senator Charles Perry saying it's time for a special session of the state legislature to share the responsibility. He said as much to a national audience this week on cable's Fox and Friends.
For those that don't know it, we meet 5 months every 2 years. The next scheduled date is January 21 every odd year. That's 6 months away, and with where coronavirus or COVID-19 has impacted the state, the decisions that will be made, need to be made, and have been made need to be reviewed by a legislative body and not just an executive office. There's strength in numbers, there's strength in testimony and witness and process, and I think that censure, if you will, from that local Republican Party is just one symptom of an exasperated group of people in the state as to the herky-jerky, unpredictable, inconsistent treatment of how we've handled COVID.
The governor, for his part, has not said a special session is out of the question and told us he's not the only one making the calls.
I work on a daily basis with both the lieutenant governor and the speaker. There are decisions, for example, with schools. Those decisions are not made in isolation by just me. They're made both with the lieutenant governor and speaker, as well as the chairs of education in the Texas House, as well as in the Texas Senate. This CARES Act funding that affected Lubbock, both the Lubbock City and Lubbock County, those decisions were made by chairs and vice chairs of House Appropriations and Senate Finance. My point is this: as we go through all this process, we receive constant input from legislators that help inform us on the best decisions to make.
But to this point, some local leaders have considered his orders to be more legal suggestions. Take that mandatory mask order. Midland and Wichita Falls say they can't enforce it. Lubbock and Amarillo say they will. Similar problem for the governor's order to limit gatherings to under 10 people. Lubbock City leaders say they'll enforce it. But in Lubbock County, Judge Curtis Parrish told our Emily Harrison the rule is impossible to handle.
We need to have all Texans follow the safe protocols that we've all come to learn,
including social distancing. The governor issuing an order last week limiting gatherings to 10 people unless a county judge can approve it.
I issued an order this morning that said if you want to gather in groups of 10 or more in the unincorporated areas of Lubbock County, that's okay.
County Judge Curtis Parrish lifting the restriction for Lubbock County, saying the ban cannot be enforced.
We are encouraging them, please abide by social distancing policies and please wear your mask. We encourage it, but it appears to me from the governor's orders that it's almost impossible to enforce.
Instead, it is up to the individual to take responsibility and monitor themselves to follow the rules.
We've got to get this curve under control. We've got to get these numbers down. The only way to do that is you have to take individual responsibility. That's the only way we're going to get this under control.
Parrish believes Lubbock citizens will do the right thing, regardless of whether or not police or deputies are watching.
I don't think people are stupid. They've seen the numbers go up. And we know that here in Lubbock County, we've seen our positive numbers go up. We must depend on people to do the right thing.
Emily Harrison.
That is Emily Harrison reporting. Early voting wrapped up on Friday. Election day for the runoff is on Tuesday, and Philip Hayes is on that ballot to be judge of the 99th District Court. Good to see you again.
Great to see you. I'm pleased to be back.
Yeah, I'm just pleased to have people in here after everything that's going on. We've been asking the candidates as they come in, have you been able to do much in the way of campaigning with COVID out there in the way of all the plans that you made?
Well, Brian, with COVID and the delay from May 26th to July 14th, it has become even more important to try and get the message out. So we've been doing it in some unconventional ways. We've relied a lot on social media, on direct mail, a lot of phone calls, emails, and text messages to our friends and people that are supporters, and asking them to text their friends and supporters. And I think we've been having a pretty good response with that. Of course, we've still tried as the weather got better and they lifted restrictions on initial lockdowns, that we were able to go out and knock on doors and see people in their neighborhoods, and the reception has been generally good. Good
deal. That's always good to know, I guess, too. And as we go through all of this, it just boggles the mind to try to figure out how to change your normal political style of talking to people and meeting with people in large groups and shaking a lot of hands when you can't do that anymore.
That's absolutely right. And typically you have rallies, you have meetings in people's homes. You want to have an opportunity to meet as many people as you can and let them hear your story and get behind you and support you, but that's been difficult to do. And so there have been a lot of fist bumps and a lot of elbow bumps and things like that instead of shaking hands, and a lot of social distancing where people will come to the door, meet them in the grocery store or wherever, and they'll listen to you for a few minutes, and I think it's working.
Wow. From a standpoint of just being an attorney, has there been a lot to do during the lockdown?
Well,
in and around?
Well, there's a lot of office practice going on right now, and we have taken all the protocols and safeguards that we have in our office with the hand sanitizers, and everyone wears a mask when anyone comes in the office, but the courthouse has not been totally shut down, but the hearings and things like that have all been by Zoom, and so it's completely different. You might have your client at his house, you at your house, and the judge and the other parties all on television. It's totally different, and I hope that's not the new normal going forward, but we may be seeing that right now.
For people who may not know, of course, you served as judge for the County Court of Law No. 3. Why go back now, and why the 99th particularly?
When Bill Souter announced that he was retiring, I felt like that the door had been opened for me to go back and do community service again. I thoroughly enjoyed and appreciated my time in County Court at Law No. 3, and I felt like that I was learning the job, becoming very good at it, and meeting the needs of the litigants that came into the courtroom. When the 99th opened up, I realized that the same types of cases go on in the 99th District Court that went on in County Court at Law No. 3, and I believe that I was appointed to that position in 2017 because of my qualifications and my experience in those kinds of cases, and therefore these are the same kind of cases. The dollar amount's a little different, but it's basically the same types of cases that go on in the District Court in the 99th District Court as went on in County Court at Law No. 3, and I felt like this is a golden opportunity for me to get back to the courthouse.
Plus a lot of litigation, a lot of family law in your background just as an attorney too, is right?
Right, that's correct, yes.
So all that's got to be well. I know your opponent is an associate judge dealing with child protection matters, which could be a type of case that would come through the 99th potentially. Are there ways, though, other than you mentioned, that you think you're more suited for this job because of your background?
I do. For 30 years, I've been a practicing trial attorney practicing in the 99th District Court. And so the types of cases that go on in there, I have the experience in handling those kinds of cases. I know what the litigants are feeling, I know what the lawyers' burdens are, and I know what the rules of evidence and procedure are for that particular court, and I think that I'm better suited than my opponent. Her experience for the last 6 years and 4 years prior to that has been essentially child protective services. She was appointed to that job because of her experience and knowledge doing child protective service cases, representing children or families that were trying to get their children back. And so when they opened that up for a new position, they were looking for a new judge. She applied for it and was qualified for it, and that's where she's been for 6 years. So for 10 years, she hasn't been a trial attorney. She hasn't been in a courtroom handling litigation or family law cases or anything else, which I've been doing now for 30 years.
You mentioned being familiar with the court, and I mentioned this to some of the other judge candidates too. What's the 99th going to look like after COVID? There's not been a lot of trial work going on in there. I know we've been trying to do Zoom and everything else, but the chances of a backlog are there of cases. How does a judge handle that kind of backlog and still keep things moving?
Well, I've had conversations with some of the other judges at the courthouse about this very issue, and it looks like that we have a visiting judge program from retired former judges that are appointed by a presiding judge. Now the judge in Amarillo is the presiding judge, was formerly Kelly Moore here in Lubbock. But I believe that they're going to get a lot of work out of those visiting judges to come in so that we can deal with the backlog, not only in the criminal cases, but also the civil matters for people that need their day in court. And so I've talked to some of the judges, and they've all agreed that they think that we'll have to get those kind of people involved to come in. And so the new judge in the 99th District Court can begin working on cases that are coming up that are new, haven't been litigated, haven't had hearings, but Judge Souter might step back in and say, okay, I've heard the preliminary motions and all of the evidentiary things before we have the trial, and so I know what's to expect in this case. I'll take that one. You go do those.
Interesting. All right, well, good luck to you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here, and I hope that people that haven't voted, Tuesday is election day, and I hope you'll get out and vote. And it's not going to be at the Uniteds. You're going to have to find the school or the church or other business that is handling the election. So I hope it works. All right.
Well, we hope to see you again soon here with us on Talking Points. Maybe as a little different role now as a judge of the 99th. We'll see. He is our friend Philip Hayes. Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you, Brian.
All right. All right, and coming up, an election day change some of you need to know about. And the last of our local judge candidates stops in to reintroduce himself to voters. Attorney Tom Brummett joins us for 5 good minutes. Next on Talking Points.
You're watching Talking Points, a focus on the political scene in Lubbock and across the South Plains.
And welcome back. Here's a look at some of the political headlines of the past week. President Trump scheduled to make a fundraising stop in the Permian Basin at the end of the month. It is a luncheon in Midland on July 29th. So what does it cost to get close to Mr. Trump? Tickets for the luncheon are $2,800 each. If you want a picture with the president, that'll set you back $50 grand. And to sit at the president's table is a cool $100,000. Well, we mentioned Tuesday's runoff election. If you're planning to vote then, a couple of changes to note. Voters who normally go to the Catholic Diocese on 4th Street now being asked to go to Rush Elementary School, and the voting center at St. Joseph's Catholic Church has been moved across the street to Guadalupe Elementary. If you did not vote early because of your health or you're worried about catching the virus, did you realize some folks are able to vote from their car? KAMC West Rappaport looks into a voting option that's actually been available for some time.
It's an option for voters that may take longer, but give you peace of mind as you cast your ballot.
If a voter feels like they are symptomatic or may have been exposed to a person with COVID-19, we encourage them to utilize curbside voting.
Curbside voting allows Texans to vote from their car. Texas election code says voters who are physically unable to enter the polling place without personal assistance or likelihood of injuring the voter's health qualify.
It's required by state law for every polling place to have available curbside voting for those persons who feel like they may injure their health if they enter the polling place.
But it sets up the potential for some voters having to wait longer in the car.
Curbside voting has been used for a while, but it's not used en masse. And in truth, elections are not set up to be drive-through. And that's sort of what this is. So it's a little bit slower process.
If you plan to use this option, the state suggests you call your county elections office ahead of time so election workers can prepare the proper voting materials for you. In Austin, Wes Rappaport, KAMC News.
All right, Wes, thank you so much. Let's spend 5 good minutes with Tom Brummett, who's a judge candidate for the 140th District Court. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to have me back. Thank you.
All right, we talked to Philip Hayes a little bit ago here about his experience in trying cases in the 99th, where he's running now. Have you prosecuted a lot of cases in the 140th over the years?
I prosecute cases in every single criminal court in Lubbock County, with the exception of the municipal court. And quite a bit of that is in the 140th. I've been in there for all of my 17 years. That's one of the courts I regularly prosecute in.
Is that helpful in all of this? Just having a feel of what goes on in there and the people involved?
Well, sure. I mean, as with every profession, you know, the day-to-day operations are not what we see on television. It's not what we see in the movies. It's a lot more detailed and a lot more in the weeds, and just knowing the details of how that works when the rubber hits the road. Also, in practicing in all, like I said, 5 of those criminal courts, you get to see an approach by a lot of judges, and through your career you develop the good, and you can take from everybody in developing your own style too. And
you talked about the different courts. We mentioned the 140th and 99th. These different courts are set up to hear different kinds of cases, right?
Correct. There are 6 district courts in Lubbock, and they're all courts of general jurisdiction. But there's an agreement between the judges that 3 of them will hear primarily civil cases, 3 of them will hear criminal cases with a little bit of family law on the side. The 140th is one of those. That's why we refer to that as a criminal court, because that's the vast majority of what that court does and the vast majority of what a judge is asked to spend his time on.
This race for the 140th started like 38 years ago with quite a few people vying for the job.
Seems that way.
Well, yeah. What is it about you and your experience that you think put you in at least the top 2 for the runoff here?
Well, there's 3 things. There would be background, it would be dedication or commitment to Lubbock, and then it would be the fact of what the nature of my job is. Background, I'm from Lubbock. This is my heart, this is my home. Have my undergraduate from Texas Tech, came back here after law school in Indiana to raise my family. I know our people, I know our culture, I know what we expect of our justice system. When you talk about commitment or dedication, this is what I've done at the DA's office my entire professional career, is to fight crime and fight for victims of crime. I could have leave this job tomorrow. I could go make about 5 times what I make now, buy my kid better things, probably live in a bigger house, but that doesn't fulfill the need that I have to give back to this community and serve Lubbock. And that commitment, the fact that I have stayed the course that entire time with that focus, illustrates why I think I'm separate and different for that job. Third thing is to the nature of the job, and I think we've talked about this a little bit before. A prosecutor's job is more akin to what a judge does, because in that charge that you have to see that justice is done, it is not just considering what is best for one particular client, the way a defense counsel is charged with doing. It is making sure that all of the pieces are best represented. What decision's best for the defendant, what decision's best for the law, what decision's best for the victim, the jury, what message does this send to the community? Those are the things that a judge has to consider, and that's very akin to what a prosecutor has to consider and what I've been charged doing for the past 17 years.
There's really nothing going on in the 140th, I know, right now because of COVID.
Not just the 140th,
yeah, really,
not every court up there, yeah.
Where do you see, though, the 140th after COVID? I mean, are they going to be dealing with trial backlogs here for a while, and how do you handle something like that?
Yes, I mean, there is going to, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, there's going to be a backlog, and it's going to be serious because the water's building up behind that dam. And when it breaks, we're going to find ourselves having to deal with a situation that's probably nobody has experience dealing with exactly the way this is before. There are things that a judge can do that have to do with scheduling. A lot of people said, oh, you have multiple settings. All the courts do that. But backing up and understanding where things bog down, here's an example. A lot of things bog down on expert witnesses from both sides. So the way you handle that as a judge, when you're doing pre-trials, you know, a month before, you set counsel down and say, no, wait a second. You need to know, and we need to know a scheduling right now to get that set so they can't pull that later. And both sides have that issue, both state and on the defense side. Another thing you can do is just be tough and hold the line. Listen, we know why the delays come in. We know the nature of having very crushing caseloads, but having a judge that not only has started that conversation early, but holds both sides' feet to the fire and say, listen, the people need justice, and justice delayed is justice denied, and making sure that they do that, even when that is not a popular decision, is going to be necessary. There's some things that, to get really into the weeds, to talk about scheduling orders and things, but those things can be done as well, and only after having seen the inside of the sausage machine can you understand exactly where those pressures can be effective.
All right, see, this is why he's running for all this, because he knows about all these things. He knows where the weeds and the sausage are and the whole thing. Tom Brummett, good to see you, my friend. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Running for the 140th District Court Judge job. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And coming up, your child's school, in class or at home this fall. And what about sports or band or choir? All things being figured out with teachers waiting for word. A closer look next on Talking Points. Public school administrators got a little more of a concrete list of safety guidelines from the Texas Education Administration this week. But KAMC's Maggie Glenn found out it seemed to do little to ease the fears of some worried teachers.
How do we maintain a 6-foot social distancing level in our classrooms?
The Texas Education Agency's most recent guidelines have left teachers like August Plock with questions. The TEA is requiring every district to offer daily in-person classes in addition to online options. The guidelines also require students 10 years old and up to wear masks. The Dallas ISD superintendent says families are expected to comply.
We're not going to get in a tussle with the family, but we're going to expect it.
But it's left to the faculty to enforce these rules.
I don't know how much any of you have tried to get a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader to do something for almost 8 hours a day, but good luck getting them to keep their masks on and stay away from people for 8 hours a day.
Teachers are worried about the health and safety risks of in-person classes for students and employees.
We're dying to go back to work, but we are not willing to risk death to go back to work.
Plock says he feels stuck in the middle, being both a parent and a teacher.
I recognize the best way to teach our students is in classroom, but I also recognize that it may not be safe for us to do that right now. And I know that there are a lot of teachers who are very scared about coming back into the classroom right now.
But says he'll be ready to teach in person if he must.
I guess I probably have those same fears myself, but at the same time, I recognize that I may be called on August 13th to start school.
Maggie Glenn, KMAC News.
Maggie, thank you. We'll be back with the final word.